"Here are your passes, Mr. Rattloo. I hope you and your daughter enjoy your stay," the man at the ticket booth said, handing over 2 VIP lanyards. It does not, Gabriel replied, taking the passes. It was not worth explaining it to someone he would, in all likelihood, never meet again. Pista trilled happily, swinging Gabriel's hand back and forth. "You're my daddy," she giggled. Gabriel had to remind himself that despite Pista's chronological age and height being equal to a human teenager, mentally Pista was 6. Sure, Gabriel replied flatly. He was not all that bothered, and if it kept her from buzzing, all the better. Pista trilled even louder at Gabriel's confirmation. He thought that maybe he should not be feeding her fantasy. Nish and Risotti were absent. Yesterday, Nish had seemed a little sluggish, so Gabriel had suggested that he could take Pista off her hands for a day while she relaxed at a spa. Risotti had gone with her, not wishing to miss the opportunity. Gabriel had gotten the executive treatment for the 2 of them, and while it was technically a violation of the terms of service since Gabriel was not with them, he honestly doubted anyone cared. As for Pista and himself, Gabriel had brought her to a well-known and renowned children's park called Jevy's Children's Funland. They needed to get up at 4 just to reach the park on time. Gabriel realised that they were now over 600 miles from Reshu. Quite the trip. "We'll get some second breakfast, then we can go to the petting zoo," Gabriel said, checking his map for the nearest cafe. "Now, keep your hand flat. That way they won't bite your fingers," Gabriel explained, channeling that school trip he had taken to a farm when he was 7. It was the only thing he could remember about that day out. Well, that and feeding a cow by hand was a one-way trip for a slobber-cover hand. "Like this?" Pista asked, keeping her hand as rigid as possible. Gabriel recalled he had done much the same thing. Pista was excited, but was not keen on getting nipped. Gabriel guided her hand towards the waiting mouth of the Sebol, who was annoyed by the wait and had begun snorting to show his dissatisfaction. A Sebol was a small herbivorous creature about the size of a goat, and with a similar temperament. It had a similar body plan to a Ree, though the neck was much thicker and the skull was large, with a heavy skull and a shock-absorbing keratinous plate used in the head-butting contest between males. It could also be used to fight off predators, but the animal's primary defense was to run into thick foliage and lose the pursuer. There were also a few babies in the paddock, eagerly chirring and begging for food. They were quite a bit different from the adults. The neck and head were proportionally smaller, and their backs were covered with sharp spines like a porcupine. These would be shed once the animal reached sexual maturity. Gabriel kept his eyes on them. While they were no threat to Gabriel, those spiders could cause a nasty injury to Pista. The adult Sebol greedily gobbled up the food pellets, a nutritious mix of everything a Sebol needed. Pista trilled with delight, and went to feed it again. Gabriel began to feel sympathy for the hungry baby, so he knelt and spread some food on the floor. A few of the more confident Sebol babies ate directly from his hand. Another Sebol noticed this. Whether it believed that Gabriel was harming the little dears, or was jealous of the attention they were getting, was irrelevant. The Sebol scraped his foot against the dirt, and charged at Gabriel. Pista noticed the movement and attempted to warn him, but her reaction was too slow, and the Sebol collided with Gabriel's rear end. Gabriel lost his balance and dropped his food, but was able to stop himself from hitting the ground. He cried out and said something, but Pista had no idea what it was. It was in Gabriel's native tongue. He was fine. The shout had been from the surprise, not pain. The Sebol, though, staggered from the impact. The beast should have considered itself lucky as it stumbled to the floor. Had it stuck in an area with less padding, it might have gotten hurt. Gabriel stood up and dusted himself off. "Let that be a lesson to you," he said, once he realized what had happened. The Sebol rose after the dizziness had passed and traversed the opposite end of the pen, his head bent low. Gabriel could not but think the animal was embarrassed, though he knew he was just anthropomorphizing. "Are you okay?" Pista asked, giving him a hug. "It's fine. Maybe my pride took a hit, but other than that, good as gold," he replied, patting her head. "I am so sorry, Mr. Rattloo," a voice behind him said. Gabriel turned to see who had spoken, only to be frozen on the spot. He immediately closed his eyes and once again was grateful that his suit hid his face. It was another of those horrifying theropod aliens. Gabriel had learned the name, Wakul, and even with the passage of time and more knowledge, he still found himself just as unsettled as he had been in orientation. "Is everything all right?" the person asked, leaning closer to Gabriel. Gabriel swore under his breath, though whether it was because of the sight or because of how much his own behaviour sickened him, Gabriel did not know. "It's fine. The critter must have made me a bit dizzy, but it's passed," Gabriel lied, opening his eyes just a crack to look at the Wakul. You're all stiff, Pista pointed out, trying to forcibly bend Gabriel's arms and legs back into a relaxed state. Despite Pista's comparative weakness, she had physics on her side, and it did not take much force to make his joints flex. "Oh, better," Pista said, pleased that the treatment had worked, and Gabriel's body entered a more relaxed state. "Well, all's well that ends well, I suppose," the keeper said. Gabriel quickly glanced at the name tag. "I'll let you get back to it," Giorgio added, before walking back to his bench. Gabriel let out a sigh of relief and condemned himself once more for his infantile reaction, before looking at Pista and asking, "Who wants to go on the river ride?" "I do," Pista yelled, her wings fluttering in excitement. Pista had been a little disappointed when it turned out they would not actually be going into the water, but that evaporated pretty quickly. She had enjoyed the river ride, bobbing along in the rubberized raft, bouncing against the sides of the artificial river, and looking at the numerous small animals that dotted the route. So much that Gabriel needed to put his foot down after the third go. "It's dinner time, and other people want to go on the ride, Pista," he explained. Gabriel tried to keep his voice calm but authoritative, but Pista was getting into one of her moods. "No, I want to go again," she demanded, stamping her feet on the floor. "No, Pista, it's time for dinner. Your mummy will be cross with me if I don't give you your 8 meals a day," Gabriel said, trying to mimic Nish's attitude. It had some effect, as her tempo started to calm, but once Pista realized she was not going to get her way, she began to buzz. "Yes," she cried. Her antenna dropped, and her wings held flat against her back. Gabriel sighed and picked her up. "I have no idea how your mother managed 14 years of this," he thought, as he carried her to the nearest restaurant. They had not been at the restaurant 5 minutes when Pista's mood did a complete turnabout, and she had forgotten entirely about the river ride. She had done well, eating all of her dinner, so Gabriel treated her to some dessert. Gabriel was drinking something that looked and tasted like chocolate milk, though from a genetic standpoint, chocolate milk had more in common with moss than the beverage he was drinking. The portions were also lovable. According to the waiter, they had needed to go rooting through the cupboards looking for a cup large enough to fill Gabriel's belly. "Let's see, we could go to the climbing frames next," offered Gabriel. "Maybe," Pista replied, clumsily lifting her spoon and dropping her cake into the bowl. "Be careful, if you drop it on the floor it's gone," Gabriel explained, looking back at the map for something that would grab her interest. "Slides, soft play area, go-karts," Gabriel mumbled, making a mental note of where all the activities were located. "Go-karts!" Pista squealed, smearing food on her face. Gabriel sighed, grabbing a paper towel and cleaned her face. "Watch what you're doing now. Go-karts later," he explained, shaking his head.